So there's been a lot of debate about the impact that AI, emerging technologies, and robotics will have on the workforce. And of course, it's been reported that women are overrepresented in jobs that face the highest risk of automation, which would be back office, administrative assistants, cashiers, and so on. But while it's easy for us to see which jobs could be replaced, it is a lot more difficult to visualize what will happen next. New categories of jobs will emerge, replacing fully or partially jobs that we have now, and the skill set that we needed for new jobs and old jobs will change. And it also will change how and where people work. So like revolutions before it, the fourth industrial revolution has a potential to raise global income levels, narrow the gender gap, and improve quality of life for populations around us. That is all if managed well. But if managed poorly, it could pose a risk of widening skill gap and greater inequality. So in this panel, we will address how governments, business community, and our vocation system can level the playing field for women and men in the workforce. My name is Olga Granaturova. I'm a CEO of Lucidity and co-founder of Brighter Ventures, nonprofit organization advancing women-led entrepreneurship. With me, I have Annie Coden, Associate Director of Boston Consulting Group, Jennifer Salinas, thank you, Executive Director of IP Litigation Worldwide, Lenovo, and National President of the Hispanic National Bar Association. Rebecca Servin-Levis, Executive Director, Microsoft Mexico, Legal, Corporate, and Philanthropies Lead. On my left, Gloria Maldonado, Executive Director, Technological Innovation Center for Construction. And of course, Yas Benifatemi, Partner, Head of International Law, Shearman and Sterling, and a visiting professor at Yale and Harvard Law School. So let's start with Annie. It works.
So AI is, artificial intelligence is going to disrupt or is disrupting our life now, but it's not new. Just to give you a little bit of history, is that it was actually coined the term in 1956 as a summer project. I guess it was not finished as that project. And the conjecture was that all learning, all intelligence can be written down in very precise steps so the computer, the machine can simulate it. One of the first chatbots, some of you may know it, was Eliza, which was a psychiatrist built at MIT, which had a conversation with a patient. And to make a long story short, as we all know, psychiatrists have not been replaced by machines. Also, it would be cheaper and easier to deal with. So what happened next? 1997, I'm just giving you a few highlights. Deep Blue, an IBM machine, won over, defeated Garry Kasparov, world chess champion. And again, why could it defeat it? Because as you all know, chess has many, many moves. It has more moves than a human can process in any reasonable amount of time, or if at all. And a machine is just much faster. So machines are much better at doing repetitive tasks. They are not better than doing being psychiatrists. How does it look today? How does it influence us? Most of us, I would say, go shopping on Amazon at least once in a while, and you cannot help it, but you see that people like you bought this other stuff. There's an AI machine which looks at your patterns, what you bought before, and suggests it, and I'm equally guilty that sometimes I buy the things they suggest. Stanford University built a system which can read X-rays and discover pneumonia in X-rays better than expert radiologists. So again, for repetitive tasks, AI is quite wonderful. But what are the drawbacks? What do we have to watch out for? Let's go into job hiring. Robo-interview, where you basically communicate with a computer when you interview, could be the solution for non-biased interviewing, right? Because they don't know whether you're a woman or man, what race you are, what age you are. On the other hand, Amazon had a program to read resumes, and it was biased against women. And why was it biased? Because as computers, that's also different. Computers learn from history. Humankind learns more slowly from history, in my opinion. So it learns from the resumes in the past. It learns from the resumes which were, if you look 10 years ago, 20 years ago, mostly male, so it looked for the good attitudes of the men. If you look at Google Translate, especially Turkish to English, it was gender biased, again, based on who was talking, what things were they trained on. And like the Translate has a doctor was associated with strong, and nurse was associated with beautiful. I don't need to say more. And Google actually is trying to now actively work that those things don't happen anymore. So what do we do? So we know that AI is biased if the data is biased. And it concerns all our lives, unfortunately, because AI programs are used for penal system, who gets released, who doesn't. AI gets used for who gets a loan and who doesn't. And if you look 20 years back, more men got a mortgage than women, is my conjecture. So what do we do? The first thing which we have to do, in my opinion, is to be cognizant of that problem. That if the computer tells you something, it does not have to be right. That's always a good statement. But again, there is techniques to make the data unbiased, to fix it afterwards. So all kinds of technical solutions. And if you're the lucky person to be in the development of these solutions, you should make this a priority to make sure that the data you use for training is not biased against any gender, race, whatever is important in this case. The second thing is that we need to educate everybody to look out for it, that it's not saying the computer must be right, it did it. It does it right according to the data it was trained. And the third thing is a lot of times computers are used as machine learning AI is used as black boxes. So you don't actually know why it tells you, no, you're not eligible for the mortgage or for the loan. So what we do in our practice is we build a separate model, which may be a little bit less accurate than the fancy machine learning model, AI, but it is understandable. It is explainable AI. There's a lot of work done, and I think we need to do more work in explainable AI so people don't get black boxes and say, you can have a mortgage, you can buy a car, or you cannot be released from prison.
Thank you, Annie. So, lucky for us, there is a significant number of jobs that require very human qualities that computers can replace, like communication, empathy, creativity, critical and strategic thinking. And in the age of AI, we need to be a new kind of smart. What's coming out, what we really need is emotional intelligence. And when it comes to emotional intelligence, women actually have an advantage. They outperform men in every aspect of AI. So, Jennifer, question to you. As we prepare for the future, it's important that we lay foundation now. So how can corporations right now fill 50% of all level positions with women, both existing talent and new talent?
Okay, well, as any good lawyer would do, I come prepared with notes because it's not an easy question to answer. It's certainly multi-layered. I first want to say thank you to the Women's Forum for having me here. When I was asked to speak, I immediately said yes. Mexico City is very near, dear to my heart. I live in the United States, Estados Unidos, but my family's from Mexico, so it was very easy to say yes, and I'm going to come early. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. The second point I want to make is there has, never in my lifetime have I felt so attacked. As a woman, and especially in the United States, being from a family of Mexican immigrants. As a woman, I started fighting for diversity a long time ago when I entered the legal profession, which was over 20 years ago. We'll just leave it at that. And the law that I practice is called intellectual property, which virtually there are no women. And so I oftentimes was confused as the secretary, as the court reporter, certainly not the lawyer. And so I started really focusing on this gender gap, gender diversity issue, and really have studied it. And the answer isn't simple. It's not a matter of just hiring more women. We know that, right? That's not how you get gender parity in a company. And quite frankly, a lot of companies do that. They feel if they actually just hire more women, that somehow the problem is solved. It's not that easy. Companies need to look at every single level in the organization, from the most junior positions to the most senior. And quite frankly, if you're looking to change careers or you're looking at a potential employer, that's what you should do. You should ask tough questions, and you should look at what the actual numbers are for women at every single level. And if there is a problem at the top, it's a red flag. So what does that mean? So for purposes of, I'll talk about Lenovo. We currently have, I believe, 18% of our executives are female. Our goal is to have that 20% by next year. One of the ways that we have dealt with what would oftentimes say that I don't buy this argument, but the argument has been made that there aren't enough women to put in executive positions. I say that's nonsense, but nevertheless, good companies are actually changing that and doing something about it and working to provide women with the skills that they need. So first and foremost, let's focus on what companies can do. They can provide the skill training that not just women, but underrepresented communities to give them the skill sets they need. And what does that look like? I've told my kids this many times. You need 3 things to succeed in any profession. You need the work ethic, you need the skill set, and you need the opportunity. And quite frankly, if you don't, you can have an amazing work ethic and you get an amazing skill set, but if no one gives you the opportunity, it really doesn't matter. So what we're doing at Lenovo with our Women Leadership Development Program is choosing high-profile women and putting them through these very lengthy 8-month training programs where they get the opportunity to meet high-level executives, which is incredibly important, but they also get the opportunity to work on fine-tuning their skills. Things like soft skills, like executive presence, increasing their confidence level. And we do that for underrepresented communities as well with our Mosaic Leadership Development Program. So that's the first thing, is providing that type of training internally for your workforce. The other thing is evaluate and correct your talent acquisition process. And I think this is where AI could actually be very, very, actually could be a game changer. Because if you program, software to recognize that that the data is already biased, and you go back and you look at your recruiting and hiring practices, if the computer tells you that this particular person has predominantly hired just men or doesn't promote women, think about how great that data would be. And then it's not even a human being telling the person that there's something wrong with you. It's a computer, which is hard to argue with that. So I think AI could be actually very beneficial here. So again, reviewing, evaluating, and correcting your talent acquisition. The other thing is, doing internal pay surveys, gender surveys, pay inequity surveys. About 15 years ago, I attended a conference at Ernst & Young, and they did an internal survey. They actually brought in another big accounting firm. I won't say who it was. And they did this internal survey to say, is there a pay inequity amongst our men and women? And they weren't surprised to find that there was a significant one. And instead of going back and trying to justify the numbers, which lots of companies do, they just trued everybody up. They just trued up the women. And I thought that was remarkable. I mean, I was in the law firm world for over 20 years. That stuff never happens. We all see the pay inequity, and it's unfortunately, it's a significant, significant inequity. The other thing is, and again, I think AI could be super beneficial here. The other thing is, and I know we're short on time, I want to be mindful of other people's, is actually going out there into the community and developing pipeline programs, partnering with other organizations. We certainly do that at Lenovo. We have partnered with national organizations. We've done that in the United States to provide STEM education for young girls as well as underrepresented communities in the United States. We've done that in Italy with partnering the STEM program. And then I will say, I'll just leave it at that for the private. I do want to hit on one issue because I'm very passionate about it. What could the government do? What can we do externally? And I do believe in quotas. They are working. For those countries that have required that there be quotas, there's been a huge difference. And it has narrowed the pay gap. It has obviously narrowed the gap amongst genders, even on those levels that are not mandated for quotas, just natural. They need to put someone in the pipeline so they can fill those higher level positions. And I'm tired of quota being used as synonymous with unqualified. There is not a lack of qualified women out there to fill those jobs. Let's be very clear, at all. And we're not asking that people hire folks who are not qualified. It's still a meritocracy. I love to use the analogy that Justice Sotomayor talks about in her book, Beloved World. For those of you that, I'm sure everyone knows who she is, right? Sonia Sotomayor, who sits on the Supreme Court. She will tell you that it was affirmative action that opened the door for her, that allowed her to go to get accepted to Princeton. But she will also tell you that affirmative action did not get her summa cum laude. So we still have to perform, we still have to work, but I just want to kind of, I'm tired of the negative connotations with quotas, and they do work, and I think I'm kind of out of time, am I not? So I'm going to be mindful of that so that the other speakers can talk as well. Thank you.
But we'll come back to that. Thank you so much. And I think it's a very important point that you made, that diversity does not equal inclusion. So that's something that we really have to make a conscious effort in corporations to make sure that there's actually a process, as you just pointed out. So Rebecca, this is a perfect kind of continuation. How can corporations collaborate with government to ensure that women are fully prepared for the jobs of the future?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. Microsoft feels honored to be represented in this forum as a sponsor and as a member of the strategic committee. So we've heard that we're in the fourth industrial revolution and that some jobs are going to be lost, and we know that. That has happened previously in the world. But I want to be optimistic about the fact that not all of them are going to be lost. A lot are going to be lost, but most of them are going to be transformed, because there are specific human qualities that will never be replaced by a machine or AI. For example, empathy, no? Collaboration, complex conversations. These machines cannot do right now, okay? So everybody has noticed how work has changed for all of us. We do not work the same way we used to 10 years ago. Today we have teams, we can work from home, we find jobs other ways through systems, through algorithms, they find us jobs. And we know that this world requires new skills that we need to acquire, all of us. So government cannot be left alone in this task. This is a big challenge. So companies, not only companies, but also the community, the academia, schools, they all need to jump in to help the government to take this task and solve it. Now, Microsoft is focusing mainly in 3 pillars: students, workers to prepare for the jobs of tomorrow, and also better work to find systems to better match workers to job opportunities. Now, in preparing students for tomorrow's jobs, we know that most of the jobs, or almost all of the jobs, will require digital skills, all of them, most of them. And young people will not only require to know how to use a computer, how to learn how to add some instructions to it. They need to learn how to use and how to navigate the internet. They need to learn how to use productivity tools. Also cybersecurity, okay? They need to maintain safe their own devices. So this is not the only way we can help students. We can also teach them computer science, because computer science gives them another way to think. They provide, this kind of study provides them with soft skills like solving difficult and complex problems, okay? So it is imperative for countries to embed into their education systems not only basic digital skills, but also computer science. Microsoft Philanthropies has partnered with governments, with NGOs, to provide digital skills for underserved communities. We're talking about 3 million young people that have received digital skills courses in 60 countries. Half of them are women. And concerning women, of course, we all know, and this has been mentioned a lot within the panel and in other panels in this event, the fact that women are not they don't tend to go to STEM careers. They don't pursue STEM careers. Microsoft has had this DigiGirls initiative for a long time. We're trying to remove stereotypes for women, for young women, to be able to choose from STEM careers. We need to let them know that they can have exciting careers in technology. They have to know that there's room for them, and they can make the difference in their communities if they choose this kind of careers. So DigiGirls is an initiative it's a workshop that takes 1 day, and they can connect with employees, with women employees from Microsoft, and they can share their experiences in the industry. Okay, so we also have to take into account that we cannot focus on the future. We have to focus today. We have to start working on today's workforce, because gaining digital skills is not very fast. It's not easy to get. So we need to focus on our workforce today. We have to have like online courses. They have to learn on the job. Employees have to understand that they have to let their employees learn on the job. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult. So we have to take advantage of all the technology we have to have online and remote courses, okay? But this is important because at the end, what we have to find out is the way to escalate them. Because otherwise, with governments, with NGOs, with academia, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to have a sustainable impact in today's workforce. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. So Rebecca just mentioned that we need to concentrate what can we do today. And I like Gloria's focus on entrepreneurship, because startups are the keys to job creation and leadership in new industries. Economic impact of increased female entrepreneurship is significant and continues to be a major driver of economic growth. But statistics is actually quite sobering and shocking. Last year, in 2018, and 2017 was the same number, female founders received only 2.2% of all venture capitalist investment. And this is something we need to change right now. So Gloria, you've been working with entrepreneurship in different sectors. How can we get more women-led startups? What can be done to enhance their abilities to survive and prosper? In terms of policy changes, financing, training, engaging young people, what are your thoughts?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me as a representative of Chile and South America on this wonderful event, so thank you. I would like to start by saying that entrepreneurship is not necessarily my field. I'm more into technological innovation. However, many years ago, I realized that if you help out other women to improve the quality of their startups. A lot of changes happen, changes that are good and relevant for the economy, for prosperity, for inclusion, for sustainability. Since that started happening, I decided to dedicate a portion of my life to women entrepreneurship, and that's how I work with different incubators throughout the country in Chile to help them out. And this is in addition to everything else we do. And I say it's so fulfilling and it's so worthwhile that I wish we all women present today that we are, as somebody else said in the panel before us, so privileged that it's time we give back. And I encourage you to help out some other women who's starting any type of initiative, and you will see you will gain a lot from helping them. Now, we see the technology, oh, thank you. Thank you so much. We see technological progress as an opportunity for our emergent economies. However, we also understand that many jobs will be lost. And how to address them is the important question of today. First of all, we know that empowering women will lead to more efficient use of the notions of any economic resources and human capital. So that is a must. There's three different areas that I see personally that could help in this near complex future. First of all, social jobs. I'm not going to discuss into that, but it's important to understand that health and education are areas in which women can excel, and jobs will be duplicating in the next 10 to 15 years. So there's a huge opportunity for women. There's also an opportunity in digital fluency. We need to manage ourselves in that and teach women and girls to be abroad in this new age. And of course, entrepreneurship. Now, I've been reading different types of studies showing many of the data that Olga just mentioned, but there's also good news. There's 51 entrepreneurship programs going out in LATAM. That is a great deal of programs. There's the female entrepreneurship has grown in the last decade. We see today in Mexico, I was reading data from last year, 22.9% of entrepreneurs are women. In Peru and in Mexico, it's to 12% and growing number. It's not enough. We understand it's not enough, but it is a good number to see growing. And from my perspective, I would like to leave you with 9 different things that I think are needed very much to increase this ecosystem for LATAM. First of all, countries need to reduce barriers for opening and closing firms. It's very important to cut the cost and complexity of opening new formal businesses. This is the only way women can grab market opportunities fast. In Chile, we've achieved a company a day program, and it allows us to open a company in one day, which is a great deal if other countries in LATAM could follow. Create incentives for individuals and organizations to invest in women-owned startups. We should promote and give credit to those who invest in women. Fourth, establish programs that promote digital fluency combined with the use of hardware and software for women-led startups. We need to do programs that help women understand and really feel comfortable about ICT and all its opportunities. Also, explore new models of funding. Focus on female-only funds. This has happened in LATAM. It should be replicated in every single country. Also, very important, it has been analyzed in many studies. Women tend to hire other women. So programs should increase the number of female fund managers in order to be able to finance more female startups. I hope you're not getting wet, are you? You all look scared. We're not, okay. Also, an important thing, and I was thinking about it this morning, looking at this wonderful event. We need to promote and make visible women who are successful. We need to show other women. Why? Because we tend to follow female role models. And so, yes, thank you, yeah. And so if we make them visible, the women who are successful entrepreneurs, I'm pretty sure we will have a multitude of new and audacious women following their footsteps. So these initiatives are wonderful and should be replicated all over LATAM. Also, we need to develop continuing education and training programs. People need to learn all their lives. It's not enough to just finish your career. You need to keep on learning the rest of your life because we want to be present. I don't want to ever step down from my jobs. I feel that I'm very capable to work for the next 25 years or so and help the guy who steps me down. I mean, I'm not going to take it. We have so much to give. So for that, we need to train. And last but not least, thank you. Increase the presence of girls onto STEM, world, and digital fluency. It is our responsibility. And I hope that you all understand that this is the way the next generation will make it well. We need to get them into STEM world, into STEM careers, and they will succeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gloria. And just to echo a couple of things that Gloria just said, I think the importance of role models is absolutely important. We need to change the stereotypes of entrepreneurship. And more role models we have, the better. And then, since we have so many corporate leaders here in the room, the other thing that I wanted to also highlight, and you kind of mentioned it, access to networks. Because as a young entrepreneur, it's super important to have a backing of a corporation. So your brand carries a lot of weight later on for women or men, it doesn't really matter, for any entrepreneur to raise money. So even if it's MOU or LOI, it is super important. So I would encourage you to actually to seek out women-led businesses and try to actually partner with them. So, last but not least, yes, from indigenous right to gender equality and from cleaner water to energy conservation, AI has a lot of potential and benefits and opportunities. So from regulatory and ethic perspectives, what should be a policy for inclusion? What do you see?
Thank you, Olga. My first word would be to thank Women's Forum and thank Chiara for bringing us together here today. It's a wonderful program. I'm extremely impressed with everyone and the quality of the speeches and programs that I've seen. And it is extremely important, and I agree with Gloria, it's important that we continue to share, to become aware and make aware. And this is key and essential in our day and our work every day. And so thank you for that. I will address essentially regulation, and that's how we can achieve inclusion. So the place of the law and regulation is key, of course, in AI and how AI will develop and deploy its effects. So to the extent I'm going to address the boring stuff, which is the legal matters, I thought I would start with an analogy. Going back to my readings, my literature, sci-fi literature memories. And you may have heard about Asimov and iRobot. And I thought back about thinking about AI and robots. I thought about the fact that in reaction, in 1942, so that's quite early, in reaction to what he called the Frankenstein complex, which is the ability of the machines and of the creature to destroy its creator, he invented 3 laws, the 3 fundamental laws. And that is really the framework within which robotics in Asimov's world could deploy its effect. So I'm not going to give all of the 3 laws, but I did want to give the first, and that's the most important one. So first law, a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. This is important as we think about AI today, and the analogy brings me to the two aspects that we need to keep in mind when we think about AI. The first is that we cannot have AI without a very strict legal framework. All of the issues that we've discussed on this panel, everything that we've talked about, ethics, diversity, privacy, and so forth, all of these will deploy their effects within a very strict legal framework, and it's important to keep that in mind. The second point is that we cannot have an AI, artificial intelligence, that will prosper without being human-centric. So it's not about mimicking human behavior, but it is about keeping the human in mind and being human-centric. Thank you. So that takes me to the very important, I find, the very important recommendations that were adopted just last week by the OECD in Paris. The recommendations were adopted by 42 countries, including Mexico, and those recommendations bring about a number of extremely important framework in relation to all of these issues that we've discussed. And I did want to refer to Article 1.2, which is really important, and you'll see the philosophy behind these recommendations. AI actors should respect the rule of law, human rights, and democratic values throughout the AI system lifecycle. These include freedom, dignity and autonomy, privacy and data protection, non-discrimination and equality, diversity, fairness, social justice, and internationally recognized labor rights. To this end, AI actors should implement mechanisms and safeguards such as capacity for human determination. Now, this is important, capacity for human determination, that are appropriate to the context and consistent with the state of art. So this was my first point as to why we need regulation. The next point is, what is it that regulation takes into account? So first of all, what is being regulated? And I will be very brief here. So we see through all of the instruments that are being adopted on AI, we see labor law being adopted and being adapted. And to Rebecca's point, upskilling is now taken into account. Recruitment issues are being taken into account. Gender equality and diversity, protection of privacy, and this is an extremely important aspect in France and the EU regulations on the subject. Cybersecurity, safety and control mechanisms for AI. Ethics, of course, and transparency and explainability, and this is what we discussed earlier. International cooperation on the subject, public-private investment, again, talking about how we make this better. And finally, education, and we see a lot of effort in education in two ways. Not only through STEM and giving access to girls in the engineering and mathematical and scientific studies, but also, and that's extremely important, and you see that, you start seeing that in the regulations and laws and recommendations that are being adopted, the importance of having a cross-disciplinary approach and to actually teach the developers, teach the engineers things about ethics and social sciences. And it's not all about maths, it's also about the other disciplines that need to be introduced. So that is what is being regulated. How it's being regulated is through an extremely rich set of different types of instruments. And I was interested really going through this, and I was really intrigued to see how diverse this is. So you have a number of binding instruments through laws and regulations. And again, it was extremely interesting for me as I investigated this to see that if you look at 3 different regions of the world where AI is being developed, you see that in Europe, France and UK, for example, but the EU generally, you have a very high level of regulation. So there's a number of regulations that you see starting on AI. In contrast, if you look at the US and China, what you see is a technology race. And the fact that really there's a focus on let's get there first, let's be the leader on technology, and then we'll think about ethics and we'll think about the other issues. So you see this divide in the regulations, which is really interesting. And then you have, so these are the binding instruments. You have non-binding instruments such as the work that's being done by international organizations, and in particular OECD and UNESCO, who have done an amazing work in this regard. You have reports and expert groups reports, either government-led, such as what we have in France with the Villani report, or in the UK, or you have very important and interesting reports such as Women Leading in AI, who have really brought a different thinking into the subject. And again, women are making a difference on the topic. You have tools, and all of the AI developers are thinking about this. IBM, Facebook, Accenture, and even Women Leading in AI are proposing certificates of fairness. We're talking about women's issues. Certificates of fairness for companies that undertake an audit and follow the processes set up at industry level. So these are also tools that are being put in place. Guidelines. Google, for example, has adopted a white paper on perspective on issues in AI governance. You have best practices. The OECD, with the recommendations that were adopted last week, have proposed a AI policy observatory to provide evidence and guidelines on AI metrics and policies and practices, so in time we evolve into best practices. And you have finally an interesting topic as well, pressure, individual pressure. And it's interesting to see that in China, where the government is really looking into the technology race, you have Chinese billionaires who are trying to put pressure on the government to try to adopt some sets of ethical rules in China in relation to the development of the field. And finally, who is doing this? And you got a sense of it through my remarks. And this, again, is extremely diverse. You have the private sector. You have either the companies that are doing the development of AI, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Women Leading in AI, and of course, also in China, the Chinese Association for Artificial Intelligence, which is a result of these pressures. And you have other private sectors, initiatives such as Data and Society, Focus on Human Rights, and AI Now Institute at NYU. You have states, and I discussed France, the UK, the US, and China, again, with different approaches. I do want to say one word about France, and I'm very proud of what's being done there. There's a 2016 law that includes a chapter on the circulation of data and knowledge. And a provision of that law provides that persons must be formally notified when an individual decision is made on them that's being made or reached through the use of algorithms. And public authorities must make the relevant information and processes known on demand. And you have another law in 2018 on professional training, so going to upskilling, where workers whose skills are no longer adapted to the evolution of technology should benefit from appropriate training inside or outside the enterprise.
Thank you, Jens. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, as President Lincoln said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. So, as our final remarks, we have some time left, how do we create the job ecosystem, developing, regulating, deploying AI that reflects the future we all want, prosperous, fairer, and more equitable?
First of all, because I was amiss before, I wanted to thank also Chiara for doing this event and bringing us all together. And I also want to thank my company, Boston Consulting Group, for not only being a sponsor and therefore not talking about equality, but putting action to it, but also for their achieving a really nice work environment for women, which I'm very happy to enjoy. To give you one example, in a recent case team meeting, everybody had to say which times they are not available, and that is being respected. So if you have little kids, you don't have to answer or do a conference call between 6 and 9 if that's what you choose. So that is a thank you. In creating jobs for women, I think it all starts with the education, and the pipeline is quite good. That is the progress we made in the last 20 years, I think, that there's more women in STEM, more women who are doing it. The issue is, why are they falling off? And that is, I think, personally, there may be a number of people who opt out personally and then have the issue that getting back to the workforce is very difficult for them to do. And I think companies should not only watch out for recruiting the new students, the new people, but also enabling them to have programs for re-educating and bringing people into the workforce, because if you have been out of the workforce for 10 years, you lost some skills which are necessary.
Thank you, Annie.
Thanks, and thanks for this question, and I did promise my team that I was going to give them some tips. One thing I mentioned earlier when my open remarks is that I'll just use the United States as an example. We have the same amount of women, if not more, graduating from college. That's a true statement, and even with STEM, that number has increased significantly. So why is there still this problem? Why do we still have this problem? One, we know that there's a major assault on women going on. We know that, right? Especially right now in the US. And quite frankly, I don't think that that would have been allowed if other women weren't helping other women. I mean, this is our duty. As someone said before, we cannot leave this to the next generation. We need, as women, to support each other in every way possible. So I want to leave you with a few tips. One of the things, a study I read, is why don't women demand equal pay? And one of the things that was staggering, what was quite remarkable, was that at the very early on in a woman's young life, women are encouraged to be good girls. Women are praised for not being disruptive. By the way, I've always been called a disruptor as well. Praised for not being disruptive, praised for doing what they're supposed to be doing, and boys are allowed to be disruptive. Boys are allowed to say no, and boys are just, well, boys being boys. And what does that mean? That instills in a woman, at a very young age, not to be disruptive, not to demand something different than what you're being asked or given. What are boys being told? That they are rewarded by being disruptive. And so I'm going to give you a tip. The next time you're negotiating your salary or you're about to enter into a new job, ask these two questions. What do my peers make? What does my predecessor make? What did my predecessor make? Okay? Again, what do my peers make? And what did my predecessor make? If they don't want to answer that question, perhaps you should think of another company. So I'll leave you with that.
So this afternoon I was having this conversation with Annie, and I was asking her, what do you do when you find that there's a system with a biased algorithm? And I asked her, do you open the black box? What do you do? And she said, education. And I agree with her. I think that we don't know which these new jobs of the future will be. But we strongly believe that education and training are more important than ever. It doesn't matter whether we're lawyers or doctors or artists. We need to transform. Our jobs are going to require digital skills. So please train in digital skills. Thank you.
So the previous industrial revolution helped us as a society globally to create the foundation of our education system, of our economic system, of our regulatory system. What's going to happen now with this new wave? We don't know. We have a real doubt of what's coming. But like my partners on the team said, this is how we do it together. We as women, we are powerful. We are trained, well-trained, especially the women present here today, extremely qualified in each of your professions. We need to change the world for our kids, for whomever is coming, to consider that our perspective on sustainability, on equality, on inclusion, on respect for each other is crucial for this new world that is coming. I would just like to leave you with a quote from Kofi Annan, which I find really wonderful. Gender equality is more than a goal itself. It's a precondition for meeting the challenge of reducing poverty, promoting sustainable development, and building good governance. So we have a great work ahead of us. Let's do it together.
Diversity, I think, is a mindset. It's important to include people, so inclusion is very important, but inclusion means that we give to every person the full breadth of who they are. And referring to what Annie discussed earlier on Amazon and finishing maybe on AI, What would have happened if Amazon had not developed that program? Probably what would have continued is that the perpetuation of the men over women and the hiring of men over women would have continued. So AI can be an effective instrument. We can use AI. We can use AI effectively, but we have to not forget that human intervention is key, explainability is key, and that we as human beings, we have a responsibility to use AI intelligently. It's artificial intelligence. We have to be intelligent in the way that we use it. So responsible AI, it's our responsibility. And in that regard, I think that explainability also means that, which is that the decision-making process can be assisted and facilitated by AI, but ultimately we should not relinquish, we should not delegate the decision-making itself. That's what I would like to finish with. Thank you.
Thank you. So the good news is, as we discussed, women excel at the skills they require to be successful in the world of tomorrow. So let's invest in them, hire them, sponsor them, support them, promote them, and elect them. Thank you.